So, Kris, with evolving regulations across Latam, how can operators streamline compliance while maintaining a seamless player experience?
I think this question is on everybody's lips right now. I think that considering how quickly and efficiently Brazil has transitioned into a legalized environment, into a legislated environment, a regulated environment, I should say, mixing up my thoughts between Spanish, Portuguese, and English still. I think that there are a few items. I think that a unified and more dynamic onboarding could make a lot of sense, as opposed to it being one rule for everybody, maybe breaking it down into different methods based on the type of user, based on the type of operator, for example, would make a lot of sense. I think also going forward, because Brazil has been used to a very innovative environment with a lot of grey market operators up until recently, and that's not to say that those operators don't still operate here, they do, but I think Brazil the demographic has an elevated expectation, which is great, right? It forces innovation in a lot of ways. And I think going forward, depending again on the platform, on the brand, on its MO, there may be opportunity in future to create a gamified onboarding experience as well. So this could be based around challenges, it could be based around, and this doesn't just apply to Brazil, but everywhere, whether there's a demo experience, for example, where the user can play games for play money. If that's the case, then you obviously don't need to go through all of the potential security checks that you would do normally, because they don't pose as big of a threat. And that would make it much more it wouldn't present such a barrier to entry as trying to force everything at the point of sign up or the point of onboarding.
Nice. And fraud prevention and responsible gaming are top priorities for everyone in this sector. What innovative approaches are reshaping identify verification in gaming space nowadays?
I think behavioral biometrics are playing a very big role in this, understanding trends within a user's behavior, not just to understand whether or not it's a different user, but also to understand whether or not the same user is possibly experiencing issues in regards to responsible gambling, for example. I think deep pixel analysis is particularly useful as well. And reusable IDs in this case. So we're working on well, we've already launched it actually, a feature whereby which you have almost a reusable wallet where you can use the same checks that you've done in the past. You can reutilize those on other platforms in future. So it's just reducing the friction as much as you possibly can to facilitate the onboarding experience.
As the industry embraces artificial intelligence and automation, what are the biggest challenges in balancing security, efficiency, and user trust?
I think one of the biggest threats at the moment is complacency. I think we're putting a lot of expectation on AI, and it will pay off, but it still is going to take time to get to that point. But even when it does, I think we need to have a degree of transparency, and we can't rest on our laurels too much. We need to understand that we still need a human presence there. We can't just leave it to do its own thing and then think that the job is done. It won't work like that. We also need to make sure that we have audit controls around decision making. So it goes back to the transparency that I was referring to again, and just making sure that we remain in control and that we truly understand, because in a lot of cases AI is going to be teaching itself. So we need to make sure that we know what it's learning and that we have visibility into that. I think avoiding biases and discrimination is going to be important from looking at it from a false positive perspective, just making sure that it's not learning the wrong things and it's not discriminating, that it doesn't have those biases, which unfortunately I think we still have as a human race, but hopefully AI evolves not to have that. And just ensuring that the data is structured properly, making sure that it's learning from the correct data structures, make sure that we're feeding it the correct information it needs in order to provide the optimal output.
Nice. And now talking about the future, looking ahead, how do you see verification and compliance technology evolving to meet the demands of Latin America's rapidly growing iGaming market?
So this is my favorite question. Within SumSub at the moment, non-doc checks take 4 seconds and liveness can take 2 to 4 seconds to do. Making that even faster, I think just making everything as seamless as possible, making it as quick as possible is an obvious first step, let's say. I think that digitalized entities are going to be the future. Brazil is doing this very well with a CPF right now. Obviously a few little bumps along the CPF road, but it's excelling in this. I mean, if you just look at Pix and how user-friendly this is, and how this is something that we don't have in Europe, right? The closest we get is Revolut, but it's completely different. And just looking at the simplicity of that, the usability of it is fantastic. So I think that's very much going to be the future, and this is something that a lot of other regions, I was going to say around Brazil, but even around the world, could definitely take from and
Like
learn.
Brazil can reshape a little bit the market too.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems as though Brazil is still in its infancy as far as regulating online gambling is concerned, but then it's ahead of the curve in terms of what it's doing with payment, with the tools like Pix, for example, and with the regulations surrounding that as well. I think that any changes surrounding responsible gambling also need to be very closely monitored. I think they need to be rolled out very slowly. There needs to be A/B testing surrounding that. You need to look at how that affects how it affects the users. I think as far as responsible gambling is concerned, I think operators and the regulators need to pay very close attention as to how changes that are being made are being responded to by the user base, by the players. For a very long time, Brazil has been used to innovation within iGaming. They've been the target of a lot of grey market operators, and grey market operators don't have to follow such strict regulation as operators who may be regulated in the UK, for example. So that's given them more leeway to create more imaginative and varied products. So we also know that Brazil enjoys a particularly high take-up or high adoption of cryptocurrency. A lot of Brazilian users, or a lot of Brazilian people, engage with crypto. They have owned or they have traded crypto, depending on which sources you look at. I think Statista mentions it's up to 25%, which, if it's even close to that number, is crazy. So the point of this is that I think the regulators and operators need to be careful not to make regulation so strict that it pushes users into a unregulated environment, back into the black market operators who may have once operated in Brazil but never got a license and possibly continue operating here illegally. And everything that needs to be done with great caution, with looking at the impact it's having and making sure that you're not pushing players away, because they know where to go, they know how to play, they know what to do to deposit. So it's a fine line between making sure they're safe and not pushing them away.